few weeks ago, and he's back via popular demand, but unfortunately we've only got a half hour with him, but I look forward to having him up for a full hour in the near future, perhaps to even take more of your phone calls. He's Porter Stansberry. He's got a long bio, but he's made a lot of incredible predictions that Barron's has called and others have called a dire prophecy. Even the Wall Street Journal has written articles. We've got those linked up on Infowars.com. Amazed by how accurate his predictions are. And I want to give you the website, and it's linked in banners up on Infowars.com, where you can watch a free video presentation that Porter put together. But I wanted to have him back on to really quantify this for people so that folks understand what dollar devaluation and the depegging of the dollar, the world reserve currency, really means. I mean, people hear Glenn Beck talk about it. They hear people discuss it. They laughed at us a decade ago when they got rid of Glass-Steagall. And we warned people what was going to happen with economists. I mean, this is really common sense, as Porter has said, but the media has tried to deny common sense. Now they're having to admit it, but they're still not telling people how serious this is going to be. Porter, from your deep research of this and the video, endofamerica3.com, that's one word, endofamerica3.com, to watch that free presentation that's so valuable, and it's got a lot of solutions as well. I mean, quantify what this means for people.
Well, Alex, thanks for having me back on, and one of the things I'm trying to do is just raise some awareness about the magnitude of this problem, because I think people have heard this a couple times over the years. Remember back in the early 90s, the government shut down for a couple of weeks, and there were some issues about, our debt's getting out of control. People were aware of the problem. But then it kind of goes on the back burner again, and now it's back on the forefront because the deficits are really soaring again. So now people are worried. But the problem is, from my point of view, Alex, is that the numbers have now gotten so large that there is no plausible way that we can ever repay the debt. And that leads our government to one solution, which is to print lots of new dollar bills to pay our obligations. The only way we can pay for them is by inflation. And just so you'll know the extent of the problem, if you look at the income tax and the corporate tax from the last year that was collected, that was the tax that the federal government got, if you doubled that, if you increased the actual revenues by 100%, it still wouldn't have covered our deficit from last year. So there's no way that we're going to be able to contain these deficits. And obviously, if you can't contain the deficits, you're never going to repay the principal. And the total liability today, right now, Alex, for all the government's debts and for all of the things the government has promised to give people, like Medicare and Social Security, all of our future liabilities, the total bill per taxpayer is now over $1 million. So how many of those taxpayers are actually going to ever be able to finance their $1 million obligation to the federal government, and how will any of that money ever actually get paid? And that's what I'm trying to warn people about. There is no way these debts can even be financed. And if you can't finance the debts, then you have to start printing money, and that's where we are right now today.
And the cartel that controls our planet, these big financial institutions that have run us in the ground, the Madoff, Ken Lay types, I mean, they could care less because they're going to be left with all the loot. We're going to be left with all the debt. I talked about quantifying it. You talk about it becoming clear that we've lost world reserve currency this year. About a week after you were on, the Russians and Chinese officially started doing trade between each other in the Chinese currency. We see gold and silver rocketing back up. I mean, when do you see it? I mean, you've pointed out the dominoes have already fallen. It's kind of like a corpse that's cooling off right now or starting to go into rigor mortis. But I mean, how do you see those phases? How do you see it becoming more evident? I mean, what's it going to look like on the street? What does it mean to the average person to lose the dollar's world reserve currency? I can't tell you how many people on the street have said, Alex, I see your show, I hear it, but I'm not in the stock market, or why should I care? Why should they care?
Well, Alex, a great example of how this affects people every day in their lives is look what's happened to the price of gasoline just in the last couple months. It's gone back above $3 a gallon, at least where I buy gas here on the East Coast, and I think that's probably true nationwide on average. The gas is now above $3 a gallon again. How did that happen, Alex? Our economy hasn't grown. Demand for gasoline hasn't changed appreciably, and yet the price of gas has gone from already from the low $2 range all the way back over to $3.
Well, one of the top, I'm sorry to interrupt, Porter, but you're right. One of the top Shell execs said it's going to be $5 in the next year.
It will be. And what people can't. What's funny, of course, is that the American people are going to rail against the oil companies, and they're going to blame them for higher gas prices. The oil companies have nothing to do with the global price of gasoline. You know, that's set by the supply of oil, it's set by the value of the dollar, and it's set by the amount of refineries. They haven't built a refinery in the United States since 1975. So, you know, there isn't a very large increase in the ability to convert oil to gas. That's one problem with the gas price. But by far the bigger problem is that the value of the dollar is collapsing. You know, you see the price of gas go up by 50%. You see the price of gold double in 2 years. You see the price of silver triple in 2 years. When are people going to wake up and say, oh, you know what? There's some downside to all this quantitative easing. There's some downside to this creating trillions of dollars to bail out Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac so that Americans can still have cheap mortgages. There are downsides to this government policy of runaway debts and money printing to pay for it. And the number one way it's going to affect people is in the grocery store and at the gas pump. And I promise you, you know, corn is at a new record price, and I'm sure the farmers think that's great. But you know what? There's going to be a big problem for a lot of people, especially the people who are on food stamps.
Yeah, a lot of folks say, well, I don't get ears of corn. Corn is a filler in almost every processed food.
That's right. And think about this. There are 40 million Americans today, not in the future, today, on food stamps. What do you think they're going to do when the price of food doubles again next year and they can't afford to feed their families? You think they're just going to sit in their government-subsidized apartments calmly while they can't feed their children? No way. You know what's going to happen. There's going to be a huge problem with crime in the cities and with people rioting and demanding more money for food.
Porter, I've got reports all over the country in major cities, doubling of rapes, doubling of robberies. I've got CNN articles today. It's already happening.
Yeah, and, you know, these things are really, truly just the beginning. And people have no idea what has already been baked into the cake. I mean, you cannot spend, if you're the federal government, next year you're planning to spend $4 trillion. $4 trillion you're planning to spend. You've only got taxes to cover about 25% of that. That's $3 trillion going to be added to our budget next year alone. You know, sooner or later, creditors are going to go, forget it. We're not going to do this anymore. And then the only thing left to do is going to be totally to supply all that money by printing. Right now, you know, the quantitative easing currently underway is $600 billion, which is a lot. That's why the prices of everything are going up. But when that $600 billion goes to $1 trillion of quantitative easing or $2 trillion of quantitative easing, things are going to get out of control really quickly.
Now, you also write extensively, and I'm reading over it, it's just excellent advice about ways people can protect themselves. And I know you can't individually diagnose people. You can just give them general systems that have really, you know, worked in the past. You've got a wide range of, you know, deep newsletters and analysis and information. People can find out more by going to endofamerica3.com and watching the free video or linking through on banners we have up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. But how do people protect themselves from this unraveling?
Well, you really have, there's three things that you have to do. Number one, you have to own real money, which is gold and silver. You have to own real money because as the global monetary system collapses, because it's all based on the dollar, as that all falls apart, you know, gold and silver are going to be the only things that really hold their value and will allow you to buy anything else you need. And then the number two things are you have to invest in energy and agriculture because those global systems are going to be the ones that are most harmed by the ongoing inflation.